So, what is spirituality?
That's a good question. Loaded question. For me, specifically for me, spirituality is having an understanding that we are consciousness, and consciousness is experiencing itself through everything, through everyone, all at once, all the time, through different levels of awareness, through you, the vessel, that is you, this vessel, that is me, and this microphone, this chair, birds, bees, trees, rocks, the sun, and everything in between, I would say. Everything that you cannot see is consciousness experiencing itself. And to me, that's spirituality. That's understanding spirit.
I love that. I heard once put, we are both the ocean and the drop.
Yeah.
And the levels of awareness, I would like to start there on how to develop higher levels of awareness. Do we all have to go through a waking up process, getting out of the matrix?
You know, so there's just levels of awareness for sure. I think many of us are experiencing self-awareness in some capacity, and then there's definitely levels to it. And I feel the way that we can broaden our awareness and have a deeper understanding of who we are as consciousness, that's the practice of presence, whether that be breath work, meditation, mindful practices. I learned that the more I get still, the more I am present, the more I'm operating from the seat of consciousness, which will allow me to become more self-aware. I've learned a long time ago that presence equals awareness, and awareness allows us to have behavioral change.
Mm.
And so most of us have poor behaviors due to just lack of awareness. Most of us operate from ego and fear, judgment, due to lack of awareness. That's what it always comes down to. And so for me, it's the practice of presence that allow me to become more self-aware and aware of how I operate.
For me, and I've heard you quote it a few times, this book, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And that is the first time I ever started to develop that awareness, taking a seat and watching the thoughts, like becoming the watcher. And I feel like that book immediately boosts people's stillness and inner peace and happiness, because I remember it's one of the most powerful, simple moments of just reading that book. I love how it purposely makes you pause to feel, right?
Yeah, for many people, that book is one of the ones I always recommend to my clients as well. Eckhart Tolle does an amazing job of articulating consciousness. He's what you would call a prophet. There's many people out there that can convey how it all works. He's definitely one of them. And then other ones like Ram Dass or Alan Watts. Wonderful people that could just speak about consciousness in such a way that doesn't necessarily trigger the ego. And that's why I think we like Eckhart so much, is that he soothes the ego when he speaks. He allows the ego to kind of be there and become more curious. And with that curiosity, it dissolves. So, yeah, I highly recommend anybody who is getting into this work to check out Eckhart Tolle, Michael Singer.
Yeah, Untethered Soul.
Yeah, Untethered Soul's a wonderful, also, he speaks it in a really cool way too. You'll realize that a lot of these wonderful gurus or teachers, they all have a different way of conveying or expressing. And depending on where you are in your journey, some you may gravitate towards to others. But for me, one of my favorites is Ram Dass too. Ram Dass he speaks in such a way where everybody falls in love. Everybody falls in love with the idea of awakening, because awakening can be challenging, especially for the ego mind. And if you identify as that self, the ego mind, awakening can be much more challenging. It's a bit more turbulence, if you will. So one of the biggest things that we all can do is really understand that we have thoughts, but we aren't the thoughts, that we have a mind, but we aren't the mind. That's something that's helped me significantly, and it's one of the things that are taught to all of my clients. Is like the first thing that I bring up, and usually that's a big awareness shift. The hard part for many is remembering that.
Yes.
Yeah, the ability to remember.
because we get so busy in our lives, right? We are chasing, we're so busy in the doing. I think
Mm,
in the West specifically too, we're addicted to the hustle, grind culture, billboards everywhere, commercials everywhere.
yeah.
It's just very consumer based. And part of when you develop that awareness, you take a step back and start really looking under the hood and seeing
Mhm.
what's going on there. I know that you're a big proponent on breathwork meditation and the plant medicine journey. For someone brand new who is maybe curious about psychedelics or just awakening and developing
Mm.
that awareness, how do you start off a new client or just a new person?
I would say breath work first. Yeah, just getting into a daily practice of breath work and meditation is the best way for all of us to start, by going inward and learning about ourself in a deep way. And so that's what I do. All my clients, anybody that wants to really start this type of work and is curious about plant medicine as well, um, do the breath work first, each and every day. Stay consistent, build a practice, and then I would then probably offer a microdose that you would stack with the breath work, and that will allow you to get even more present, a little bit deeper. What's nice about getting into breath work and meditation on a consistent basis is that you'll start already tapping into the frequency that mushrooms provide, right? So mushrooms, everything's a frequency, everything is vibration. And so the sacred medicine, mushrooms carry a wonderful divine frequency. And so when you ingest it, it literally raises your vibration, right? And allows you to see through a different lens. And that's why people have these wonderful breakthroughs or this awareness shift is you raise the vibration and then you experience as consciousness that lens. And so you can also do that with breath work. The breath cleanses the body, which raises your vibration, raises your frequency. So now you're seeing through a different self, a different lens as consciousness. And if you stack that with a microdose, then you can amplify that even more. If you stay consistent with your breath, meditation, some microdose, eating healthy, grounding, working out, you can amplify that even more. You can raise that frequency even more. And if you stay consistent with all these practices, and you have affirmations and mantras, which also shift your vibration, you end up experiencing a wonderful self, a self that's love and understanding, that isn't reactive, that has grace for individuals, that has empathy for individuals, for self and others. So yeah, I learned a long time ago for me to have the best experience or put myself in a place that to be my highest self. My inner work or my practices are the main priority of my everyday life, and it's not something that I have to do to check off a box. It's essentially walking with God actually, because I learned a long time ago you don't believe in God, you walk with God, and that's in your just daily work. When you wake up, what are you doing each and every day? And the breath, the meditation, the affirmation, the mantra is the walking with God, so to speak. The grounding, the sunbathing, the training, the eating clean, all that stuff. And so I made that my purpose, and that has allowed me to attract a beautiful reality through people, money, items, opportunities that match that frequency. So that's really cool too. Once you see how it really works, how the laws or the principles of this universe that govern this universe really works, how God works.
It's an abundant God.
Yeah, and he's unconditional.
And we mostly all start, I don't know, just for the majority of people who had parents that didn't really know better.
Mm,
A lot of them were, there's a famous book, The Adult Children of Emotionally Unavailable Parents, or something like that.
very common.
Yeah. And
Mm,
so I believe, we all go through that hero's journey of discovering who we are, right? You're the hero of your own story, your own movie. And a lot of times growing up, for me, it was hell.
mm,
I had two brothers and we were just nasty with each other. We were
mm,
barbarians, fist fighting, yelling at the top of our lungs, the language that we used. But we were young and dumb and didn't really have father figure guidance there. And
yeah.
um, that was hell. But now, in contrast to where I'm living in the last few years, it's heaven.
Mm,
And that saying that heaven and hell is in the mind, it's here, it's on earth.
hmm
How do you find yourself still, you know, having some human Justin moments, like when you achieve this kind of level
mm.
of frequency, like
It definitely happens.
Yeah,
I
so,
think
like,
that's
the lower self activity sometimes, like, because 'cause we're
yeah,
all still human sometimes.
yeah. Well, so it definitely happens, and I become curious of when that happens. So what I call that is when I fall back asleep in the trance
Mm.
with the ego mind,
Ooh.
right, and the identification with the false self. So as consciousness, that can happen. And so I started asking like, well, why does that happen? And it was always tied to my thoughts, my words, and my behaviors. That's what it's tied to. It's like, okay, like why do I fall asleep? Why do I forget that I am consciousness and identify with maybe my ego or these stories or what have you, like when I get triggered. And so I learned again a long time ago, if I focus on my mindful practices of practicing presence and doing the things I know that are good for me and aligned with me, with my highest self, my highest purpose, I have a much better ability when things are intense, um, when things are uncomfortable, I can pause, as Eckhart would say, and really look at it and respond with love and understanding as opposed to fear or judgment. So that was a big moment for me. I still, of course, get caught, but it's always tied to my behaviors. If I skip 2 or 3 days of breath work and meditation, or if I overindulge in, say, low vibrational food, or if I'm, engaging in too much things like phone time or screen time, that lowers my vibration. And then if I do get triggered or activated, it's much harder to catch if I'm in that vibration
Mm.
as consciousness. So I learned a long time ago, if I get this instrument, this body, as high as vibration as possible, the frequency is as high as I can get it at this point, I have all the ability in the world to pause and operate from a place of love and understanding and not be so reactive.
Which is such a beautiful thing when you have the awareness and the energy to be able to be like, "Maybe I need a break." I did an hour, hour and a half of, like, a deep work session,
Hmm.
scrolling or listening to some music or going for a walk.
Yeah,
You have a whole board of things
yeah,
that connect you, right? Like, tell me about
yeah.
that.
Well, I think a big part of the awakening process is incorporating new conscious behaviors, and that's kind of hard at first because we have to reprogram, right? So our brain is like a computer, so we have to reprogram it. It's been conditioned and programmed through our childhood, through our adulthood, and awakening to the fact that we're not our mind, our programming, our conditioning is the step first, is awakening from that. The ability to not fall back asleep is another step. And so not only will the mindful practices reprogram your human thinking mind, but all of these really fun behaviors like the boards that I have, they really help me do just that. So instead of, many times most people when they wake up, they have these behaviors they've been doing unconsciously, whether that be snooze, 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 wake up, reacting to things, grabbing their phone, looking at their social media right away, smashing some, coffee, what have you, running out the door, rushy, rushy, rush, what have you, maybe eating some processed food along the way. And this is most of the time just operating without any type of awareness. And so to change those behaviors, if you've been doing it for 20, 30, 40 years, can be very challenging, and met with quite resistance. So that's another reason why it's good not to identify with your thoughts, because if you can remember that when you awaken, those thoughts will definitely still come in and
Mm.
tempt you to go with the old programming. But then you have the ability to pause and not go with that old programming and like, oh no, we're going to do this instead. We're going to take 15 minutes and go outside and put our feet on the grass and get still and connect with the sun, connect with the earth, right? And we're going to drink our water before smashing a coffee. Maybe we might read some conscious book for 10 or 15 minutes to set the tone for the day. And we start incorporating these new practices that will elevate and raise this vibration, which ultimately will also um, change your reality.
Earlier, you were talking about triggers.
Hmm.
So I've heard that triggers are like our gurus, our teachers. They show us where we're not free.
Yeah, they definitely can be.
No better than to be in a relationship to get triggered.
Yeah,
Your conscious partner is the greatest mirror for your evolution.
yeah,
You celebrated a year anniversary
yeah.
semi
Recently,
recently.
yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Tell me about how you apply spirituality and this awareness into your partnership. Tell me how it was like when y'all first got together. I saw
Yeah.
the podcast on your website. It
Mhm.
sounded like it was around when you first met Gina. Was it before you were dating or
No, so
during?
when I first met Gina was well before we even considered talking to each other romantically. She and I have a mutual friend. Her name is Emily Hayden, an amazing person. And I think Gina was, seeking or interested in spirituality at this point. And she came to me for a breathwork ceremony, a mushroom ceremony, and a DMT ceremony 3 days in a row. So she flew out. It was a full experience for her, wonderful experience for one of the more powerful experiences of her life. Some deep healing, some deep forgiveness, a deeper understanding of self happened in that space. And then just through that with all of my clients, we became friends through social media. She was living in San Diego at the time. Um, and at that time, I was really focused on my work. And I don't really look for relationships when it comes to getting in them. I more so just allow them to come to me and unfold naturally. Trust and allowing is one of my big mottos with life. And so I desire a relationship, but I don't necessarily seek them. And so she would actually pop up more and more on my social media feed, and she would speak a lot of cool stuff, and I found that attractive. And then I saw her playing guitar, and that reminded me of my mom, which I found also very attractive. My mom always played the guitar and sang. And so after I saw that she played the guitar, I was like, you know what? I want to get to know this person a little bit more. So I shot her a DM and I go, hey, I dig you and I want to get to know you.
No way.
Yeah. And so
You already knew.
I already knew. Yeah. Yeah. She had a
Wow.
cool vibe. And we ended up connecting a month later. And,
Connecting as in like a phone call?
no, she actually came out here for a festival. And we connected at the festival just briefly. And then I learned that she was now available too. She was in a relationship prior. And so the next day after the festival, I told her I would love to get to know her and connect with her if she's open with that. And she said yes. And then so we started chatting like that. She came out and visited, and she came out and visited for a full month, which was really cool too. So we got to connect for a full month. And then, yeah, that was pretty much it. She moved here after that. So I drove out to California. We packed up her stuff and drove across the country, and she moved here, and it's been over a year now.
There you go, claiming your bride or your prize.
Yeah. Yeah.
Claiming your woman.
I think what that's hard for a lot of people, right? I think,
Oh,
yeah,
especially in this dating world.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. I think when you know thyself, right, it's way different. Most people can't trust themselves. Most people don't know themselves. And so I think that's a big thing that I have within me is like, I know who I am. I know what I like. I don't lead with fear.
mm-hmm.
I was also okay with, I can commit to something fully. And then also if it doesn't work, I'm okay with that too. Right. I'll always operate with love and understanding, even if it doesn't work, And so,
I think that's huge right there.
yeah,
Is if you know yourself
huge.
and if you're in tune with your body and if you're not forcing anything to happen, like you said, but you're just being pulled in that direction of love. And that's very similar to my story as well. We're about to be 5 months and I'm just so grateful
Mm,
because I love being in love. That's what we are, right?
hmm
In a very healthy way, not like you're saying, like if it doesn't work out, then you know,
mm.
it's the non-attachment, I guess.
Yeah, that's one of my superpowers, I would definitely say. And I've always been like that. I was born like that. Very grateful for that. To be honest, I don't have any attachment personality. And what's cool about that, it's terrifying sometimes for your partner, but they also eventually really love that and almost desired it as well.
Because if you think about it, attachment, like there's a lot of relationships that just stay in it because it's comfortable and they've
Yeah,
blended their lives a lot.
codependency. Yeah,
Yeah, codependency. But the true alive, passionate couples are also not afraid to leave
correct. Yeah.
because just like in life, death is a certainty. And keeping in mind that we don't have to be doing this.
Mm,
So how are you going to show up?
yeah. Yeah, that's the big difference. Are we leading with love or leading with fear? And most individuals, unfortunately, they lead with fear in most situations. It's done unconsciously. And I've really learned that I'll always lead with love and understanding as much as I can. And if I'm not, it's also because I lack awareness at that point, or I'm unconscious at that point. As soon as I become conscious, or I awaken and remember that, who I am, then I can shift real quick and operate from a place of love and understanding as well. And so relationships become much different. There's no attachment, because attachment's also ego mind, and it's tied to a fear. And so when we no longer operate from that space, it allows relationships to unfold and operate as they should. And yeah, whether that chapter ends romantically, it necessarily doesn't end in other ways. And you still have this profound relationship. And that's very hard for people too. Like, I have wonderful relationships with my previous partners. Like, they're my closest friends. I love them.
'Cause they know you the best.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
That is something that I've rewritten with my ex's social circle and family circles, like how a loving ending looks like.
Yeah,
And it is a death
for
in its own
sure.
way. It
For
is a
sure.
death. And people mourn and you'll mourn and go through the
Yeah.
grieving, but the actual person doesn't die,
Yeah, man.
right?
Yeah.
So if you had that much chemistry, sometimes for whatever reasons a container can end,
Mm,
but another one can begin.
yeah. Well, I think what we can always operate from is from a place of kindness. And that's one thing that's important to me, is operating with kindness. Doesn't mean sometimes I still don't operate from the ego. It's very rarely, but you know, kindness is where I always retract back to. And 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 understanding that, like, if we end up having different values after a period of time, that's okay. That
Mm.
doesn't mean one is good, one is bad, one is right, one is wrong. It's just, my previous relationship simply ended because we had different values. And that's okay. And maybe for the 8 years that we were married, we had the same values, but then maybe something shifts in us. And then we want or desire different things. Our values change. And maybe they don't align with that. And so, how can we lovingly decouple with an understanding, like, it's okay that we want different things now? It doesn't mean failure, right? It doesn't mean the relationship was bad. It just means that we desire different things, and we can honor that with love and understanding and help each other along that path, and in fact, stay in each other's lives and still, yeah, support each other, and still be in contact with family. And it was great. Like, I remember the first 2 years after my divorce with Steph of 8 years, I got to spend Christmas with her those next 2 years. It was
Good.
incredible. Yeah,
Right.
I love her mom. I love her sister. I love her whole family. Her dad's great. And so
Were y'all in relationships,
at that time,
or you both were
I think she
single?
was kind of seeing somebody. I think I was dating. No, I wasn't dating anybody at the time, during that time. No. But, yeah, I don't think, I mean, obviously, if I was in a relationship, I'd probably be spending Christmas with a partner, but the fact that I was single at the time. But yeah, it was just nice to have that ability to go and be with people that I truly love and truly care about, and share those moments. It's fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic.
There's nothing like a very loving example, whether it be friends or, of course, romantic partners. People feel the love in the room
Mm,
if you see an affectionate couple, right? Um, and then you become people's role models and examples. So
mm.
when that ends, that also kind of challenges people's paradigms.
Yeah, it was actually, I think, tougher for other individuals, because we obviously have a social media following. Steph and myself did. And I think a lot of people have a tough time understanding why a relationship would end. So, and in most people's relationships, almost all probably, when they end, it's due to, like,
Yeah, something
unconscious
tragic. Yeah.
ego and fear and betrayal and what have
Mhm.
you. So for a lot of individuals, their brain couldn't comprehend why, people that are in love may all of a sudden no longer be together. They can't see that it's just a values thing. That's it.
For the majority of people who do end tragically,
Mm,
those are symptoms of deep underlying issues.
yeah. Misunderstandings, lack of communication is a big one.
Checking out for X amount of time.
Yeah.
People have needs, and a lot of times people don't know how to meet their own needs or even communicate.
Yeah. Again, like all unconscious behaviors. Most people are walking around unconscious, reacting to life. Most individuals are in relationships unconsciously. Most individuals are in relationships out of lack or fear, feeling a void of being alone, or what have you. And so a lot of these things are being driven from fear unconsciously. And so that's a big part of why relationships are challenging for many. Also, individuals, I think, don't have a true understanding that love is an action, which is consistent effort. So that's paying attention to how much you're connecting versus checking out. I think a lot of individuals, because they don't manage their energy well, they become overwhelmed in life, stressed, anxious, restless, addicted. And so often people end up checking out versus connecting. And most people, when they probably get home from work, they turn a TV on, they have a glass of wine, they smoke a little weed, and they're kind of zoning out for the next, 3 or 4 hours before going to bed. And, me and my partner really understand that, like, that's a time for connection. It doesn't mean we don't ever enjoy a film or what have you, or smoke a blunt together, but we understand that there's balance, and it's important that we create moments of deep, deep connection and presence so that we can continually cultivate this love. And we do other things too, like, daily notes to each other. But we also train together. We cook together. So we share responsibilities together. We work as a team, or, once you see your partner not even as the yin to your yang, but more as it allows you to be one, becomes oneness. And so it's a team. Yeah. And it's wonderful. And it takes time to build that new system. I mean, most people aren't doing that for themselves if they're single. It's not even just relationships. Most people, when they wake up, they're not doing any type of mindful practice. They're kind of on autopilot. When they get home, they're checking out, and they're kind of just going through the motions of life. And then something usually has to happen, whether it's a freak accident, near-death experience, or they eat too many mushrooms by accident, or they suffer immensely, right? There's usually something that will kind of break them out of this matrix, this sleepy trance. Sometimes it's relationships, ending or beginning to break the trance.
That is so huge. A
Mhm.
tragedy. Like, because we're all creatures of habit. And they say, honestly, maybe by the time you're 21 or 25, you're set on your haircut, you're set on your
Mhm.
style, you're set on the way you talk, music, food. And that was me when I was in my previous relationship. The illusion of marriage is, oh, it's legally, like you did the full on
Yeah.
commitment. So subconsciously, I started checking out and stopped trying.
Yeah.
I don't know how it would have been if it was just boyfriend, girlfriend, but the plus side, if I could rift for a minute or two,
Yeah.
of marriage is it got me through the crisis moments. Like, hey, we're gonna figure this out.
Yeah.
Because maybe I probably wouldn't have been as persevered as much if it wasn't for that.
Yeah.
There's
Support.
so many good things for that container of marriage, but the downside was I was checking out
Hmm.
my style, my looks. Like I was just a caveman.
Yeah.
I was just being me though, and she loved me, and that was the thing. But I think it really just takes, honestly, the man in the relationship to stay present and to stay in tune, because a woman just multiplies and
Mm.
is
Well, they're definitely following, they're looking for, if she's in her feminine, for the man to lead and provide in that space. And so if we're unconscious, if we lack awareness and we're going through these motions, a lot of times our partner will follow us in that space. And that can definitely lead to suffering in all types of ways. And I learned very quickly that, my woman does watch me and she is paying attention to me. And she does trust me and she does surrender to me. So with great power comes great responsibility. So I learned to really look at my behaviors and my habits and realize there's an individual that is looking to me for guidance and eventually, having a child with me, and that child will be looking to me for guidance, and in feeling that weight, I think many have experienced, but most usually turn the other way when that weight hits, where I felt that weight and got kind of really excited. It motivated me to be even better, to dive into my practices even more, to eat even cleaner, to provide even more for myself and for her, because now I can see that she's watching and she's learning from me. And so, yeah, I enjoy the responsibility of being in this masculine role. I understand the importance of it as well. Yeah.
For others, maybe asleep. For me, I was until I was 25 and then got into plant medicine, and that definitely reenacted the tragedy. You
Mm,
feel it. And that's the benefit of plant medicines is they can really be a catalyst for change.
yeah. Well, they create presence, right? That's what all these plant medicines are doing. That's what meditation does. I always see presence as a portal.
Presence is a port.
Yeah,
It's
presence is a
good.
portal. So if your human mind is consistently chatting and talking and spitting out thoughts and programs and what have you and judgments, there's no time for presence. So the portal isn't open for the higher mind to give you a download, so to speak. And so, since you are consciousness, I am consciousness, if we can understand that, if we can get the mind to be still through mindful practices, this opens up a portal, so to speak, for more intelligent thought to come through from a higher self, from a soul self, from a God self, from other entities or guides that are also living with loving awareness and operating from a place of service. And so presence create that window of opportunity for information to come through from the conscious field. It's like that cartoon. You get the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other, and the human represents consciousness in that scenario. And it's hard to maybe hear the angel speaking if this one is really loud, if the ego devil is really loud. And so how can you quiet that down? How can you quiet down that space? And it's going to be through your practices. It's going to be through awareness. Mhm.
Beautiful. And that does explain it well too, because you don't want to wait for a tragedy to happen to
Yeah, you don't have
experience.
to. Usually that's what most people have to endure, is an immense amount of suffering to actually make change. But I was just talking about this with Gina, and like, yeah, you don't have to touch the stove 10 times. You can just touch it once and be like, ooh, okay, well, what can I do so that doesn't happen again? And it's not necessarily avoiding anything, but you can become really aware that it's not necessarily necessary. When you do fall into suffering, though, those are wonderful, amazing opportunities to have a deeper understanding of why you suffered. But as soon as you become aware, you no longer suffer. You can't, and you're never choosing to suffer consciously. Suffering is essentially unconscious, or is unconscious. It's when you awaken to a different perspective of love and understanding that you no longer suffer. You suffer because you're trying to control. You suffer because you're resisting, as opposed to just allowing what is.
I love that. The control part is huge
Yeah, they're one and the
because,
same.
yeah, the ego by its nature is just trying to survive, protect itself.
Ego's funny, So there's two types of fear that I think that, like, to point out. There's primordial fear, which is like the human aspect of fear. And then there is egoic fear, and egoic fear was manifested and created by the human thinking mind. I don't necessarily think you need the ego mind in any capacity. It is there to show us and is there to help us learn where we are operating from, or are some shadows that are still, in there. And they're great. It's great if it's there and it can teach us. But I don't think the ego mind is technically needed per se. The primordial fear, though, that kind of makes sense. It gets you out of harm's way. If a bear is chasing you, if you have to fight or flight, if a car is coming down the road, you can move out of the way. So that's really wonderful, and that will always serve you. But egoic fear is kind of interesting. It's operating from seeking too much pleasure, judgment, or fear, and mm, you can learn from that when you do it, which could be helpful. But for the most part, like, there's really no reason to operate from that space. And I feel like that's what we're actually transcending eventually. That's what we're actually dissolving through our practices, through the trials and tribulations of it. And when it does rise, you end up having the ability to look at it and be like, oh, okay, no, thank you, but I'm all set. And I don't need to operate with that fear anymore.
So Justin's not checking his bed underneath his bed, the closet, not
No,
afraid of the lights out.
no.
What was the? Because I remember growing up when I was younger, that kind of fear you describe after seeing like an Exorcist movie or
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Paranormal Activity or something, I wouldn't leave the door open, and
Yeah,
I'd be afraid of my own mind.
yeah, yeah.
Just for story, what was the last time you were really afraid? It could be either
Oh,
one.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think the last time I got caught in the trance of fear, right, as consciousness, caught in the trance of fear as consciousness, was when I got put in real financial scarcity. I was conned by an individual and really taken advantage of, and I lacked discernment. It's not like they actually took advantage of me. I lacked discernment. There were things that were in my blind spot which allowed to happen. So it was, once I saw that, I saw that it was completely still on me. But it put me, that lack of awareness and that lack of discernment, had me fall into this space where now I was financially very scarce. It was not only myself, it was like 4 or 5 other people that were also now in financial scarcity. And because I was leading this space, I felt like I was very responsible to make sure that they were okay. And so taking care of them put me in a certain space. And I fell into like, how am I going to do this? The what if, the hypothetical fear. I fell into not being present. I fell into worrying about the unknown, which is the definition of anxiety. So I was riddled with anxiety. And then I found myself operating from that place within my work. I found myself consistently thinking about the unknown and what if this and what if that. And for about 3 weeks, actually, I was stuck in that space, and it was horrible. I couldn't train. I wasn't hungry. My work suffered. I wasn't creative. I wasn't writing. I wasn't putting out the content that I love to do. I also was trying to get clients from a different space for the first time. I never tried to get clients, to be honest. That was never a thing, isn't a thing for me. But when I was operating from fear, I then wanted and needed clients. So my energy was actually repelling. I actually wasn't being of service. I was servicing self, which was a repelling energy. And so it only made it worse. People didn't feel safe. Like I would have a consultation and my work became about serving me versus serving them because I needed their money. I needed them to sign up versus like, I don't mind if you sign up either way. I'm here for you. And so I lost that for about 3 weeks, and I was able to catch it. And the way that I was able to break that trance and move through it freely was a mantra. I am at peace with what is. I fully trust. I fully allow. I'm at peace with what is. I fully trust. I fully allow. And I realized that just because things are uncomfortable doesn't necessarily make it bad. And that's also when I stopped labeling things as good or bad. Reality is reality. Right? And when we resist reality is when we feel divisiveness within ourselves. It's when we suffer. And so I looked at what was happening and then I fully accepted it just as it was. And then what happened next was to understand, well, where are we operating from? Do we actually fully trust? Do we actually fully allow? Or are we operating with fear? I was like, ooh, okay. So I realized that no matter what happens, how uncomfortable things get in my life, I won't operate from any other place but love. And so I shifted that energy within myself right then, removed the fear of the unknown. It's also insane to be in a hypothetical mind movie of things that haven't happened yet. I learned that very quickly. And I realized no matter what, I'm going to operate with love and understanding moving forward. So that was really powerful. So the lessons that taught me were profound. Yeah, it allowed me to really understand who I am and where I operate from during some big tests and, during some big trials and tribulations. And so I think a lot of us, when life gets hard, we become conditional. And that's what happened, right? For 3 weeks, I became conditional. And so I learned like, oh, for now on, no matter what, moving forward, my love is unconditional. And if I do fall asleep in the trance, how can I reopen fairly quickly? And so those are wonderful moments. And it actually was helpful because I could apply this lesson to many of my clients that are obviously mostly in scarcity in a lot of ways, teaching them how to be unconditional, teaching them not to see things as good or bad. Yeah, it was a big moment. Yeah.
Love that story, man. Because you have to go through some struggles,
Mm,
right? And I think that I heard Robert Grant talk about before we were born as a soul, we already picked our betrayers
mm,
to teach us
mm.
forgiveness. We already picked certain challenges because that's the earth school that you're going to
Yeah.
dive into, which is beautiful on the abundant side of things. But what about to the starving artists out there?
Mm,
I want to combine this question with plant medicines and cannabis.
yeah.
These weed used to have a bad rap because people were lazy, kind of
Mm, mm,
doing that, and maybe people are getting too high because I definitely get pretty sluggish. But
mhm.
there's a fine art to these plants to be used as allies, and then there's probably a fine art to your work ethic or your
Yeah, balance is key. I think awareness is key. Intentions are key to a lot of those things. Yeah, and I think checking behaviors, like pausing on them, taking a break from them,
mm,
evaluating.
that's what people don't do, right?
No,
Especially with weed.
yeah, most of this stuff is just awareness again. It's just awareness. It's hard to, again, become aware if you're not practicing presence. So for me, I can consistently, I also have a ritual where I love you, I thank you, and then I do a daily reflection on the prior day on where I operated from my ego. And so, whether I seek too much pleasure, whether I fell into judgment, or where I fell into fear, I do it every morning as part of my ritual. So, it keeps me in integrity, it keeps me accountable. And so, if I woke up and the first thing I do is wake and bake and then engage in some food and then skip my practices, and then I'm on my phone because I'm high and not paying attention, and then I watch 6 hours of UFC and then order a pizza the next day because I check my behaviors, I look at like, all right, well, Justin, where did you fall into too much pleasure? And it's like, well, it's clear as day where I did it. And did it serve me? And it's like, no. All right, well, let's make the adjustments today and move forward. And then next time, how can we operate? Because weed's not bad, pizza's not bad, but balance is good. So maybe next time, because Sundays are usually my days to really kind of flow, really, really flow. I still work on Sundays, but a lot of it's flow where I'm a bit more laid back. I'll maybe indulge with a little bit more marijuana, or I'll watch my UFC fights, or, I might engage in a little bit more food. But I started paying attention to that, and I can see when I feel misaligned the next day. I can feel the vibration in my body. And so then I can look at that and be like, all right, well, how about instead of waking and baking, I first go get a really good workout in, do some sauna and cold plunge, get my breath work and meditation in. And then I can come home and have a little bit of weed. And I notice when I honor my practices and I have a bit more balance in that day, when I engage in these other things, pleasure's not bad, but there is intention and there is mindfulness around it. And then the next morning when I wake up, I feel aligned. I don't feel misaligned. And your body's always communicating. A lot of people, when they wake up and they feel misaligned, what they do is they create a story of shame or guilt around it, and they actually don't make any change. It pulls them deeper. If you wake up and you feel this vibration, your brain's going to want to create a story of shame or guilt, or for whatever reason, like, oh, I ate horrible yesterday. It's like, well, okay, well, why? Why did we eat horrible? Or like, what can we do next time and learn from it, become curious of it, as opposed to creating shame or guilt.
That's such a powerful thing. Shame and guilt is the worst
Mm.
thing that you can do to yourself.
It's also the ego.
It's also the ego.
Mm.
Um, being able to give yourself grace and an understanding. In fact, maybe sometimes in people's evolution is retraining their mind or at least the ego voice to be compassionate and loving to yourself.
Mm.
It's wild to see how many people are just projecting like, road rage or all kinds of things, all kinds of like you would never talk to a child that way kind of language
Mm.
when they're doing that because they talk to themselves that way
Mm.
even worse. And
Yeah, it's a lot of unconscious patterns, unconscious behavior. I mean, When individuals are operating from their fear mind, they're completely asleep. They're also completely in trance. And so it's hard for individuals to pause, especially if there's just no awareness around it. And that's a big, I mean, I used to be part of that, where if someone was aggressive towards me, that could provoke me, right? That could get me to drop and fall into a trance and then want to fight as well. And having the ability to pause is, again, like very challenging for most because they don't practice presence. If I didn't practice presence, if I didn't practice mindful practices and meditation and what have you, if I go, a week or two without it, I have a much higher ability to fall back into the trance. You can provoke me possibly, you can get me. And the reason why you can get me is because my vibration's lower from not doing my
Mhm.
practices. Yeah, that's the big part I think a lot of people can't really understand, is that everything is energy, including your human body. Your whole physical body is made up of atoms, and they vibrate a specific frequency. And depending on that frequency is what you experience as consciousness. So if you are engaging in low vibrational behaviors all day, whether that be your food, your TV, your phone, the clothes that you wear, the companies you support, the water that you drink, that's the frequency of your vessel, and that's what you're experiencing as consciousness. And if it's a low vibration, you're probably much more reactive, and you don't have the ability to pause. And so, again, like, it's really important to me to raise the vibration of this human vessel, so I have a much better experience as consciousness, more loving experience as consciousness.
That's brilliant, man. With the abundant life that you've been able to curate, what are the projects you have going on, or what are you looking forward to?
Just being of service, to be honest. That's all I focus on, to be honest, in my entire life. And the way that I can be best in service with my small practice is just the small work, the inner work, the breath work, the meditation. And that, of course, allows me to have and create ideas like the men's retreat that we're going to be doing, the mushroom men's retreat, create containers. Yeah, it just allows me to create more. And so I definitely excited to make those happen more often. I have the Nirvana Nation, which is a virtual container. I do the ones at On It every month, which is an in-person container for all aspects of people to come through. More ceremony retreats like I'll be doing now, more men's retreats, more women's retreats, more couples retreats. A goal for me is eventually to get land and have a Zen garden for people to come through and do Vipassanas and darkness retreats and come through and do some wonderful work. So for me, it's about creating a service, creating containers. So that's what I mostly focus on. And I have a few different ways of doing that. Our work that we get to do together through conscious conversation, the plant medicine ceremony that we got to partake in, it was quite beautiful. Breath work and meditation, sound healing, and movement. And so I have a few different channels, and I'm sure I'll experience or explore more as I, you know, play and explore and then offer that to people as well. So essentially just trying to create more containers for people to awaken.
We're definitely doing it, man. And speaking of one of those explorations of channeling,
Hmm.
um, I would like to pick up on a part two, and I'll link to the episode where you went into detail
Yeah.
of the backstory of the ETs.
Yeah. So I have a few clients right now. So basically what I do for work outside of the mentoring aspect is I hold space for individuals to come into their own, and I also get to experience some wonderful otherworldly phenomenon, and so I've quite a few actually clients right now that are experiencing channeling. But one in particular I've been working with for about 3 years, and he started channeling about 7, 8 months ago. And him learning how to navigate that was terrifying. He also thought he was schizophrenic. And so I was able to hold space for him during conversation and through breath work during that process, and also meet the ETs that came through and have a wonderful relationship with them now, and understand their mission, their goal, the relationship with the individual I was holding space for, which is amazing. It's all love. It's it's something we can't even understand, but yeah, essentially, yeah, helping him learn who he is, remember who he is, why he chose to come here. That's a big part of it.
What resource, I heard y'all mention Gaia and a few different subjects on that. Is that kind of required to understand how?
I think breath work and meditation is the best way to learn how to understand the mysticism outside of our human experience. Gaia could be a wonderful.
That's maybe where I'm going to next, to kind of learn about the different
Yeah,
races and
Gaia could be wonderful because you have people that are doing the inner work to share their findings, but your human brain's still going to be like, is that real? I don't know about that. It'll always come with all these things because it has yet to experience those things, your human mind. What's cool about it, when you get your human down to breathe and meditate, it will start to experience the spirit world, this mysticism that you can tap into. And with practice and enough times visiting, the human mind starts to expand its understanding of the universe and how it works outside of its five senses.
yeah, which I've definitely experienced myself profoundly.
Yeah.
But those downloads that you get on a psilocybin or, plant ceremony, how much different is that from the downloads of channeling or like,
So from what I've understand, we're all channeling, right? We're all channeling at all times. It's just we're not really aware of it. So again, we're consciousness channeling thoughts from the ego, channeling thoughts from the higher mind, right? And so channeling from other places. And so, like for example, when I was going through my process of awakening, I was channeling as well. I just wasn't aware I was doing it. So that's how I kind of fell into my work. People would become curious about this stuff, and when I would explain it, I was able to articulate, channel
mm,
consciousness in a wonderful way, in a way that was comprehensible, and the way they can understand, the way they felt safe. And so there's that form of channeling, which we're all capable of doing, right? We're always channeling. We're just not really paying attention to it. And then there's other forms, which is, say, Bashar. And Bashar is a ET, or a future, in quotes, a future entity. That's also actually one and the same as Daryl. I think you realize that they're one and the same being, so to speak. And eventually, they end up merging, and becoming one again. And that's the same situation with this one individual. Like, it's his higher self, his soul self, his guides, if you will, like his family, his soul family, channeling through him, helping him remember who he is in some capacity, raising the vibration of his body, of his mind, removing the fear and what have you.
and again, for everybody, this is just the little summary. Like, they went into deep detail and it was pretty amazing. Like, I'm
Yeah.
starting to think of like the antenna of like,
Oh,
of how
yeah.
he's finding it. And it's similar to like a TV, right? They call that a channel and
Yeah,
different kind of things.
that was the main work, is making sure that he was raising his antenna vibration, his human body, so that the channel could come through properly, be understood, and that they can actually do the work that they came to plan here to do, which is help people heal. And so that's the main reason of the breath work. And out of all the practices too, by the way, whoever's listening, the one thing that they always reiterate that people need to do is breathe, breathe, breathe. Don't miss a day. They actually say, don't miss a day. Breathe every day, breathe every day. And I even brought up other practices like training, eating clean, exercise. Like, those things are good, but breath every day is what actually cleans the instrument. It's what finally tunes your antenna, so to speak. So you can actually hear from your higher self, or maybe a future self that's trying to connect, or your guides, or what have you. And so that became the main priority, as cleaning his instrument. And so there was a clear channel for them to come through and guide him on his purpose, or his mission, so to speak, that he came here to do.
Love that. One final question, just because I'm curious. And I know it's a summary. I think you're going to do a deep dive on
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
soon.
Yeah, I think next Friday's the goal, is to connect my buddy Sean, who does the podcast with me, and then also bring in my friend, and kind of tell the whole story.
Yeah, would
What I would
love
like to
to.
do too is, during that, hire an animator that will animate
Mm,
the story as we're talking about on the podcast. And then, if my friend is open to it, he now has the ability to. When we first started working together, we would have to do, a little bit of microdose, do 7 rounds of breath work, and then they could come through. He would essentially have to raise his vibration.
yeah.
And then it got to the point where he would do a round or two and they would come through. And now, because he does this work every day, he's lost like 40 pounds, he trains, he breathes every day, he eats really healthy. He now can literally turn his head and they come in. So now he can drop it. He can ask them a question at any point. They're always around him, always next to him. So if he was sitting here right now, you can ask him to ask them a question, and he could then turn and then boom. And then he can also go even deeper where he can go offline, so to speak, and then they can channel through him and speak through him. So he can ask questions with them, or he can let them fully take over his body, which is what you see with Bashar,
Yeah.
right? And Daryl. So he, same type of setup with that. And when they come through, then you can ask questions. Yep. And they answer for you.
Final question.
Yeah.
So are these beings physical in nature, or is it like different dimensional kind of thing?
Yeah, they don't have bodies. They're light beings, essentially. Yeah, like astral bodies.
Mm.
And so, but they can choose to take form. They can come into this experience. So that's what my friend is. He's an astral body coming in and taking form, reincarnating in this body. And in the process, he's working with the human's emotions, the human's mind, the human's ego. Yeah. And so that's a bigger challenge, obviously, awakening from that and managing that and healing that aspect. So then you can start operating with your purpose, why you actually came here, the mission that you came here. So there's like a whole remembering aspect of like, oh yeah, I forgot that I chose to come down here and do this powerful work. And that's where he's at right now. He still works with a lot of his ego that comes in and wants to sabotage or tell him that he's crazy, all these types of things. And so it's been fun working through that.
It's beautiful, man. For everybody listening to those kinds of stories, just look more into it,
Yeah.
learn a bit about it. I think they're saying that the population has to be ready for first contact.
Yeah, I think
Like,
we're already there, which is really cool. We see it all over the news, these orbs in the sky, these drones or what have you. I think we'll come to realize that some are drones, other ones are UFOs, essentially, ETs. And from my knowledge is that the ETs are amazing. They're of
yeah, if they
service.
were
Yeah,
menacing, then
and they've been here forever. It's not like
yeah,
they're just arriving. They've been here since forever. I would definitely tell people to study the Anunnaki, the Earth's true history, and have a deep understanding of what that is, because that'll be helpful. Essentially, it's the movie Avatar,
yeah,
to be honest. The humans in the movie of Avatar represent the Anunnaki, and the avatars represent indigenous humans.
mm,
And so once you see it through that lens, you can see the humans as the Anunnaki and Avatar. You could see that like one wants to service themselves and like dig up
yeah,
whatever it is to service themselves. And then you have the set of humans that are like, no, that's wrong. And they end up, kind of fighting each other. And that's the story of Earth. You have two, groups that come from one space, the Anunnaki, and one are like, hey, we're all about enslaving these indigenous people and having them serve us. And the other ones are like, no, we're not doing that. And then there was a war. And instead of like this, I forget what it's called in the movie, it was gold. Yeah, mining for gold. So it's the same story. Yeah.
yeah. I did hear about that, and it's so fascinating. And that is a
Whole
subject for
thing,
another
yeah.
podcast, man. But thank you so much, Justin, for
My pleasure.
being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
See ya. Very cool.